Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much. I'm very happy to be in this country of very, very great civilization. I thank IDSA and Ambassador Passad for inviting me. In recent years, I have been thinking how we can contextualize extremism and terrorism of our time. One way is to concentrate at the personal level of analysis, which was just said. Here you talk about psychology. But I go for a very larger context, and that is globalization, because the terror that we are confronting with now is really in that context. Three things I have to explain in the context of globalization. One is the state sovereignty. Usually globalization goes somehow against state sovereignty. And in fact, it has effect or 4 or 5 dimension or criteria of state sovereignty. One is territory. Second is legitimacy. Third is control. Fourth is exclusive use of force by the regime or a state. And last, manipulation of intelligence. In the context of globalization, all of these have to be modified. And of course, depending to the type of theory or a school of thought that you look at sovereignty, this might have some more modification, but it still is important. In the time of globalization, you talk about erosion of state sovereignty, and this has a consequence on radicalization and also terrorism. The second issue in the context of globalization would be the role of non-state actors. And here I mean terrorist groups and terrorist organizations. This also has changed a lot. In the time before, let's say, even until 1970s, when you had a terrorist incident, a hostage taking or airplane hijacking or whatever, there was a crisis management team together. On the top was a psychologist, because they wanted to first to understand what is the motivation of this terrorist or terror which is being committed. They first go to, is it a psychological issue? If not, is it economic motivation? And if not, is it a political motivation? And of course, the role of psychologists at the first time was to, because usually they said, okay, within 12 hours, if you do not do this, then we kill all this many. So the first issue the psychologist was to do to postpone this time limit. Assuming he could do that, so he concludes that the guy is rational. We can bargain. Now we go to politics, now we go to economy, you know. But nowadays, we have passed all this. There is no more crisis management team on the top psychologist. Usually we go to generals. Usually we go to diplomats and those who think, you know, so-called big. It means many things have changed. At that time, a terrorist group wanted to introduce himself or the organization. If you read this message through radio, then I give up. But nowadays, journalists are running hundreds of kilometers to catch terrorism. That's a bit different. Why? Because you are in fourth generation of communication, you know. First publication, then telephone, telegraph, then satellite, and now web. It is a huge difference for this kind of, you know, terrorist activities that we. things which has changed. First is ideology. Now in our region, you are talking about religious terrorism or religious or sectarian. Of course, it is not by nature sectarian war. It's not between Shia and Sunni, because we've had our differences from 1400 years ago. But this new phenomenon of extremism, Muslim extremism, is a modern idea. It goes to modernity. It goes to globalization. And before that, it goes to colonization. So it's not really something. When you talk about jurisprudence, fiqh, Sunni and Shia, no faqih, not any of them, has agreed that you can have this kind of terror. It is a very recent idea, as it was said by Maududi and Sayyid Qutb. Before that, the jurist only set the principle direction. And now it is the politician who has to introduce the subject of this kind of thing. And that's why it goes to Maududi and Maududi said the Qutb, and when it comes to jurisprudence, only Ibn Taymiyyah. It's very much different. The concept of takfir, it goes to interreligious conflict. This is absolutely a new concept. It is a new phenomenon. We did not have it in the past. So it's not a sectarian war in essence. It's a political war. It is something for geopolitics. In the name of religion, in the name of sect. And we know. So this type of globalization has had tremendous effect on this. 9/11 was a result of globalization, and it was anti-globalization force. And it was against the engine of globalization, which was the United States. Now, the smart thing by George W. Bush was that he said, I push it back to your home. And that's what we have in our region, in the Middle East. And it was I remember myself, I was in the United States at that time. I listened myself. So it's important to say, still understand. So ideology has changed. Motivation also has changed. Then the leadership. Before globalization, you had to have someone like Ayman Zawahiri and, Osama bin Laden for the type of leadership. But because of this fourth generation of communication revolution, everybody can be a leader. I remember when Obama came, one interpretation of how Obama came to power was this American romanticism. And Obama gave a new reading of American romanticism, contrary to what Reagan had said. So for 3 decades, only one narrative of American romanticism. And this new romanticism says, look, assuming the traditional romanticism of America, assuming you're talking about theater, you have 3 things. You have a scene, you have act, you have actor. Then Obama said, change the scene, everybody can be actor. You don't need our founding fathers or heroes. So everybody can be leader. In this sense also, terrorists do not need those type of leader, And the communication, as I said, very important change. And then it comes to mobilization. It comes to logistics. It comes to, many things has changed. It's not really absolutely necessary to say a state has to support, because you don't have control on your border because of this erosion of sovereignty. If you have no control on the border, then they can do. And the nexus between terrorism, WMT, and corruption, narcotics, So they can raise money through this kind of thing. One more point is that in this era, when you create something, including creating a terrorist organization, morally you are responsible for what you did. But in practice, you cannot unravel. For that reason, this is important thing which I want to say. Grand Ayatollahs, from Shia, from Sunni, because of this, they are detached from the web. So they cannot have that much control on the generation which is creating of all these, terrorist activities. And that's, important. Recruitment, in old days, recruitment was very difficult. But today, recruitment from every nationality, from every segment, even a Muslim and non-Muslim, come together. The guy has been, Christian until last night, becomes Muslim tomorrow, next day becomes part of. So recruitment has changed a lot. So these are whole lots of things. And for the first time, terrorist group can claim to have a strategic effect and a strategic change. Changing border, changing state. That's a new phenomenon. We did not have it in the past. So this is the second point in the context of globalization. So I said state sovereignty, and then I talk about, NGOs, mainly terrorism, how this has changed. And then it goes to main actors now that we have. Like it or not, many things has begun from Afghanistan when it was occupied by the Soviet Union. I wrote an article after 9/11 in New York, and I said the coup which changed the Middle East. I refer to 1953 coup of Americans in Iran. And somebody tell me, oh, you want me to bring back Eisenhower from the ground and to respond? I said, no, I'm just telling you the things we are doing now. It has consequence. And so many things really goes back to the big players of international system. If you name it international system. American way of fighting in Iraq was a Jacksonian way of war. They have two schools of thought. One is Wilsonian way of war. The second is Jacksonian. In a Wilsonian way, you stay there when you fight. And then you try to bring political order. But in a Jacksonian way, you create a mess, leave it for the rest. This is what has happened in Afghanistan. This is what has happened in Iraq. Vacuum. When you create vacuum, then this is what Trump is just telling times and again. You created a vacuum, and now you have all these terrorist groups, So those big actors of the international system, they have to make really a decision of what should we do. Do we have to look at terror as an instrument? This is something that very obvious. Everybody has to decide. Trump has come to power. He is a voice of anti-globalization, and he is telling times and again. He is for the status quo. Now, is this a status quo for every country, territorial integrity of the countries? Is it for the regimes that are ruling in those countries? These are some things that has to be very much. Everybody knows many things are ambiguous. The first case for America First of Trump is going to be determined in Syria between Putin and Trump. And what happens in Syria has a very important consequence on these terrorist activities that we're talking about. If you discriminate there, calling one group not terrorist and the other group terrorist, is this is not going to a nowhere. Very much depends how this Russia and America will deal together in Syria. Things in Mosul also in Iraq has very important consequence. If they want only to get rid of Daesh in Mosul and leave them to go other side, it goes to Afghanistan. It goes to Syria, goes everywhere. But if we really direct our attention to destroying terrorism, that would be a different thing. So it's a difficult job in the Mosul to say, destroying the thing. Those who are in play in Mosul are many actors with many motivations. The problem will come after Daesh in Mosul. So this is also a big job of what is going on over there. So I'm trying to say that two different regions, inward looking, outward looking. We have a lot of problem in our countries that when we talk about terrorism and different things, everybody put blame on the outsiders. And counter argument, everybody put the blame on the inside of each country, inside the Middle East. But I think it is there an interaction between them. For sure you have, for every event, you have a necessary condition to that to happen. But at the same time, you have a sufficient condition. There is an interaction between the global players and big players of international system and what is happening in our region. If things wants to be controlled, this interaction for solution also has to be there. Then, if the issue, if terrorism is terrorism of global reach, it means the resolution and the solution also has to be from everybody. Whether it is conceptual or theoretical, I always think of theoretical issue that we have to think about theory because down the road is a causation, why terror. And theory gives you an answer to why and where we are. Of course, not every theory is there because theories also creates confusion. So theoretically, we have to do something about what we're talking about, Then, can anybody stop globalization? No way. So Trump is wrong to say I'm anti-globalization. Possibly economic globalization can be controlled. But when you talk about technology, when you talk about science, when you talk about knowledge, when you talk about exchange of information and intelligence, no one really can stop. So let's benefit from globalization, but not only for some part of the world. Middle East is in a globalization lag. That's why we are here, especially when we talk about economic fruit of globalization. So this, I think, the benefits of globalization should be for everybody. I very much stress on human security. Human security in the West, they always think is for themselves. When it comes to our region, they think about security of Israel, they think security of oil. We are telling, no, human security, security of oil, as long as it's for the security of the people in this region. And of course, security of Israel, that's something which not many people buy in this region. So human security is important element if we want to, The military solution, absolutely for some part, but we are really in a war of idea. Those who want to fight terrorism, they have to think in this context of war of, idea. Then I think we have to have a package for dealing with terrorism, which has all aspects, coming from at the level of international system, then going to the society, economy, and all those kind of things. And thank you very much.